with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, May 14th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. Downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, White House reviews military plans against Iran as we remember the Maine. Also on the program today, Attorney General Barr assigns a U.S. attorney from Connecticut to investigate the Mueller investigation. And Kristen Nielsen, remember her? Well, she attempts to whitewash her record with reports that she happily worked for 18 months for a moral monster. And the first federal court ruling on Trump's subpoena avoidance due today. Meanwhile, the 2020 race, backbenchers scramble with Biden's entrance as Sanders' support amongst young people drops in the first half of 2019. And the conservatives on the Supreme Court signal its willingness to breezily overthrow precedent. Ominous signs for Roe v. Wade. In New Haven, a mosque targeted by arsonists. And the third largest U.S. coal company declares bankruptcy. Thanks, Obama, though actually not. And in California, a jury awards $2 billion to a couple over Roundup cancer claim. All this and more, in addition to a look at the Subsys rap video, responsible maybe not directly, but indirectly for thousands upon thousands of deaths in 2017.
Little team building exercise.
Yeah,
for the
there we go.
executives.
Nothing like, and we'll talk about this, but I, as a young actor, I participated in a couple of industrials, not for a drug company, but for an insurance company where you, but we can talk about that another day.
I'm usually opposed to blaming rap for drug deaths, but in this
yeah,
case...
no kidding, right? All right, let's start first with I just want to get a couple of things off the table here, as it were, in terms of the courts. As you know, I tend to be a little bit focused on what's going on with the judiciary, because that is the one branch of our government that is much more difficult to fix with an election, at least short term. And the worst part, well, I guess as of today, of the Trump administration is ultimately the Trump administration's, and hand in hand, and in fact more so with Mitch McConnell in the Senate, ability to fundamentally alter the makeup of the federal judiciary, including the Supreme Court, but also the appeals court and the circuit court. And the implications that this is going to have for decades. Decades. Let's start first with the Supreme Court. Over the past week, we've talked, week and a half, 2 weeks, really more by coincidence than anything else. We had on Robin Marty, was it?
Yes.
To talk about her book, a handbook for a post-Roe world. And I don't know if I got the title of that book correctly, but it basically explains what we're going to be looking at within a couple of years. And in the week and a half subsequent to that, we have seen 2 more states pass fetal heart bills, I guess, laws that have not gone into effect but have fully passed both the legislature and have been signed by the governor. And these bills essentially say abortion is banned after approximately 6 weeks after a woman becomes pregnant. Now, most women who have become pregnant will tell you that they have not found out that they're pregnant until week 5 or 6 or 7 or after that. Because, of course, it takes a while, unless maybe, I guess, if you're planning and you're checking vigilantly, you could find out before then. But 4 weeks is the normal menstrual cycle, and sometimes people are a little bit late. The point is that you actually don't have a fetal heartbeat. You have maybe the functional pulse, essentially. Because the organ of the heart is not fully developed at that point. It's not really a heartbeat, but nevertheless, it is a fetus. And these laws, one that passed in Ohio over the past week and a half, one that passed in Georgia, the one in Georgia, a woman is criminally liable if she goes across state lines to get a legal abortion. There was a story in Alabama where a Republican lawmaker told her story of being raped as a way of getting a rape exception in the Alabama bill, and then she was targeted by a fellow lawmaker who was handing out basically a fact sheet saying that unborn children, in his words, should not be punished because of the sins of the father or the parent, speaking of the rapist in that instance. And to further the point as to what we're going to be looking at, unless one of the 5 sitting Supreme Court justices gets hit by a bus, and somehow that vacancy will last until the Harris presidency or the Beto O'Rourke presidency or whatever it's going to be, or Sanders presidency or Warren presidency or, God help us, the Biden presidency. So that's the future that we're looking at. And the question has been, how will they attack Roe v. Wade? Will they simply chip away at it? Will they lower the scrutiny that the court will impose upon states' laws that infringe upon the right of a woman to choose an abortion? In other words, if there is a law, a trap law, that is passed, like the famous one from Texas, which required admitting privileges by doctors within a certain distance of a hospital, or there are laws that have been passed that require abortion clinics to have like 16-foot ceilings or something to that effect, that are clearly designed to make it impossible to have access to an abortion on a practical level? Or will they simply overturn it? Well, on Monday, yesterday, there was a case in front of the Supreme Court. It was involving a franchise tax board. And I'm not sure of the name of the case. But it was essentially a question as to whether states have sovereign immunity from private lawsuits in the courts of other states. Can I sue the Vermont Franchise Tax Board in a New York state court? In 1979, the Supreme Court ruled that there is no constitutional right for states to avoid liability in other courts, state courts. So this is a 40-year-old precedent, which was overruled yesterday in a 5-4 ruling by the conservatives. The fact that this precedent was overruled is not going to have much impact on our daily lives because there's only been 14 instances in those 40 years where a state has actually faced a trial in another state. You follow that? But what the Supreme Court does is that they use some cases to create principles that can be applied to other cases. Sometimes they'll do it within the issue set. So they'll look at one limited case about abortion. They'll rule on one small thing that will have implications for a case down the road. They begin to build a record through their decisions. They create a series of assumptions or predicates for later decisions. Clarence Thomas wrote Monday's decision, said there was an implied right in the Constitution. These are literalists, incidentally, right? There's an implied right in the Constitution that means states could not be held involuntarily before each other's courts. States can give immunity to other states. They can get into compacts with each other. He said the court's decision 4 decades ago, in this case Nevada v. Hall, is contrary to our constitutional design and the understanding of sovereign immunity shared by the states that ratified the Constitution. Stare decisis, that's the idea of respecting precedent, does not compel continued adherence to this erroneous precedent. Now, put aside the quality of his ruling. He argued that the state's sovereign immunity is historically rooted principle embedded in the text and structure of the Constitution, although it was not explicitly set out in the text of the document. All right, but put that aside because that's just the run-of-the-mill conservatives, originalists, and textualists BS. We should only, the Constitution is only as written.
It's like a la carte.
Right. It's only as written unless we can see something that we can imply that's in there.
Then you use your common sense.
And then you use your common sense. All right, but that's not the issue. The issue isn't the nature of the ruling. The issue is the argument as to why they can reject and on what grounds. And this is going to be the new standard for this court. As long as 5 people determine it's erroneous, that's it. It can be overturned. Which, for lawyers and for judges, undercuts the fundamental point of the judiciary. It's not supposed to be a third house of lawmakers, right? It's not just a majority of people. It has to be because there's some type of legal rationale that makes sense. Here is Justice Breyer's dissent in Franchise Tax Board, rather. And it is a warning, some people suspect, in terms of what could be coming down the pike in terms of Roe v. Wade. He writes, it's one thing to overrule a case when it, quote, defies practical workability. When, quote, related principles of law have so far developed as to have left the old rule no more than a remnant of an abandoned doctrine. Or when, quote, facts have so changed or come to be seen so differently as to have robbed the old rule of significant application or justification. This is in the, he cites the Casey case. And those are three separate tests as to whether you can, you should or can overturn precedent. When the law simply doesn't work out the way that we anticipated and doesn't function, when the related principles of law have so far developed as to left the old rule no more than a remnant of an abandoned doctrine. In other words, all of the other doctrines around that law have made the original law seem archaic or nonsensical. Or when facts have so changed or come to be seen so differently. In other words, hey, gay people have the same rights as us, as straight people. Turns out black people are not second-class citizens or should not be second-class citizens. Or it turns out that, I don't know, maybe down the road in terms of what constitutes animal cruelty, if we find out that animals are completely, have a level of consciousness that we did not understand. Something like that. I'm not making any proclamations about that. I'm just using that as an example. He writes, it's far more dangerous to overrule a decision only because 5 members of a later court come to agree with earlier dissenters on a difficult legal question. The majority has surrendered to the temptation to overrule Hall, even though it is a well-reasoned decision that has caused no serious practical problems in the 4 decades since we decided it. Today's decision can only cause one to wonder which cases the court will overrule next. So he is basically saying this case is being used as a way not just to resolve a barely existing problem in our law as it stands now, which is whether a state can be hauled into court in another state's state court. But rather it's being used as a tool to overturn the precedent of a different case, of future cases. It is being used as, and may not just be Roe v. Wade. There's going to be a long project for this conservative court. And if Thomas resigns this summer, and my guess is that's going to happen. My guess is he's going to announce in June, maybe even later. Because I think, Mitch McConnell is going to replace him with someone younger. That is the end of the project, even if Donald Trump leaves at that point. And that's the project. To have a 5 conservative members of the court who are in their 40s and 50s, who will be there for decades to come. 20, really 30 or 40 years is the question. And will fundamentally change U.S. society. In addition to the Supreme Court, Mitch McConnell, once again, for those of you who have been following this over the years, there are 2 ways in which a minority in the Senate can stop the confirmation of a federal judge. One is to filibuster, and the filibuster is now gone in terms of lower court judges and Supreme Court. So that is actually effectively gone. Excuse me. Traditionally, I meant to say, that's gone. The other way that was a tradition was that the home state senators both have the ability to withhold what is called a blue slip, which is basically like a sign-off on federal judges who are being appointed in states or in circuits or in regions that the state is included in. Yesterday, the Senate voted 54-42 to confirm Joseph Bianco, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit based in New York State. Every Republican voted for him. 2 Democrats, Doug Jones and Joe Manchin, voted for him as well. All the other Democrats either opposed or were not around to vote. Bianco's confirmation marks the 3rd time in history that the Senate has confirmed a judicial nominee over the objections of both of a nominee's home state senators, Chuck Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand. They didn't turn in their blue slips for Bianco, and McConnell ignored that, whereas Patrick Leahy allowed that to happen multiple times. He is Donald Trump's 38th confirmed circuit court judge. That's more circuit judges than any president in the history of the United States has seated at this point in a first term. At this point, that 1 in every 6 seats on the nation's circuit courts is now filled by a Trump nominee. And this is pretty stunning, this complete domination of the courts that Republicans now have. Short of the First Circuit in D.C., which is, probably the second most powerful court in the nation. Republicans are slowly basically taking over the judiciary. Not so slowly, actually, under Trump. McConnell has been just shoving these justices and judges onto the courts. And the bottom line is that Democrats not just need to win the presidency, they need to win the Senate. And they need to win it not just because you got to be able to give a Democratic president the ability to get judges passed through the Senate, but also from a structural standpoint, if they don't win it now, they have a very, very hard time to win it in the future. Which makes things like Beto O'Rourke running for president and Bullock from Montana, who just jumped in, running for president, and Hickenlooper from Colorado running for president. If you do not know the names Hickenlooper, or you only recognize it because it's a funny sounding name, or you vaguely recognize the name Bullock, it's because they're not going to win the presidency. But in Montana and in Colorado, those two could have possibly challenged effectively their state's senator, winning those seats for Democrats. Crucial, crucial seats. Texas is another one. How primed is Texas to flip in terms of the Senate race? I don't know. Let's ask Beto O'Rourke, because apparently how close they came in Texas in 2018 is the foundation of how he's going to win the presidency of the United States.
everyone's important, everyone counts. And at the end of the day, more votes than any Democrat has ever received in the history of the state of Texas. Young voter turnout up 500%. Won independence for the first time in decades. And 500,000 Republicans in Texas also joined that movement. So a movement comprised not just of an expanded Democratic electorate, but a movement comprised of Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike. And now, for the first time in at least my adult lifetime, maybe since 1976, Texas and its 38 electoral college votes have been unlocked. They are in contention, and we will have a seat at the table.
Yeah, so this is him talking, pushing Beto 2.0. Apparently, they're relaunching. And I'm sorry. At one point, if we're to believe the soaring rhetoric about helping our country, but country first, I was destined to do this. If you're a candidate of destiny, is it your destiny or the country's destiny? Like, I mean, the unbelievable narcissism of people who purport to tell us that they're just so compelled to public service that they have to do this. And then using the Texas miracle as if Texas was a miracle, then how about you dig deep and run for Senate, even though it may not be the job you want? I mean, honestly, it really is. Like, I don't know how we're supposed to take seriously a candidate, and I'm not just talking about Beto O'Rourke. I'm also talking about Hickenlooper, and I'm talking about Bullock and others, frankly. If it's too much of a self-sacrifice for you to run for the Senate, but you think that it's that you're compelled to help the country by running for the president, you're full of crap. I mean, honestly, it's pathetic. It's disgusting. Because a Republican Senate is in 2020 is going to be devastating. Going to continue to be devastating for the country, regardless of who's president.
It was for the good of my high school that I lobbied so hard to be prom king.
Yeah. Well, you really gave of yourself for that in that campaign. Meanwhile, let's just talk about this report about. Let's do the Iran stuff first. There was a report today in the New York Times that the White House is reviewing plans, military plans against Iran. At a meeting of President Trump's top national security aides last Thursday, acting defense secretary. We don't have a defense secretary, incidentally. We haven't had one for over a year now? When was it Mattis was gone?
I think Shanahan was recently appointed. I don't know if he's been confirmed.
He's acting.
Yet.
He's acting defense secretary.
We're going to go back to calling it the Secretary of War.
He presented an updated military plan that calls for sending as many as 120,000 troops to the Middle East should Iran attack American forces or accelerate work on nuclear weapons. That's a big or there, isn't it? And it's also pretty vague. What does accelerate work on nuclear weapons mean? Does that mean accelerate work on weapons that could carry nuclear warheads? Does that mean accelerate work on potential dual-use enrichment of uranium? We don't know. The revisions were ordered by hardliners led by John Bolton. They do not call for a land invasion of Iran, which would require vastly more troops. So, 120,000 is just what you need if you're just going to stand by while you bomb Iran. It is unclear whether the president has been briefed on the number of troops or other details in the plan. Here is Donald Trump being asked if he was seeking regime change in Iran.
You're trying war with Iran. Are you seeking regime change
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake. If they do anything, I'm hearing little stories about Iran. If they do anything, they will suffer greatly. We'll see what happens with Iran.
The Mad King has heard little stories about what they're doing in Iran. And of course, one of those stories was that the UAE claimed that 4 ships were attacked the other day. One was Finnish, 2 were Saudi. I can't remember what the 4th one was. Emirati. The story now is that the Finnish boat was attacked by something in the water. And that the Saudi boats, though there has been no pictures of damage done to these boats, there were no deaths, there was no leaking of oil, were attacked by something else that came from somewhere else, maybe a drone.
UFO?
Well, yes, of sorts.
In a certain sense.
But somehow they figured out that it's Iran or Iranian proxies, which could basically be anybody but the Saudis or the UAE folks, I guess, right? I mean, theoretically, it's all divided up into 2. You're either on Team Saudi and UAE, or you're obviously on Team Iran, according to them. So there's a lot of vagaries, and Mike Pompeo, in a last-minute meeting change, apparently he's scuttling all over the place, head to Europe to talk to European allies on Monday. And presumably he was looking for some support, maybe. We don't know. But here is the EU response to their meeting with Mike Pompeo. This is Federica Mogherini in Brussels.
Mike Pompeo heard that very clearly today from us, not only from myself, but also from the other ministers of EU member states, that we are living in a crucial, delicate moment where the most relevant attitude to take, the most responsible attitude to take is, and we believe should be, that of maximum restraint and avoiding any escalation on a military side.
So in other words, not interested is what the EU has to say. Meanwhile, Pompeo is to meet Putin today to ostensibly we'll be talking about that as well. We should say that Pompeo literally crashed the Brussels meeting of the EU. They weren't anticipating him. They just showed up there. And presumably, maybe he has special satellite images, because the satellite images showed no damage to the sabotaged Saudi ships. It could have been mental sabotage, emotional sabotage of the ships. That doesn't show up on satellite
Sonic
pictures.
sabotage.
There are some people who suggest that the military option that was offered, that is being reported now to Bolton, in the event of a non-ground war, non-ground invasion of Iran of 120,000 troops, is the military signaling to the civilian leadership, we're going to make this very hard for you. We're going to tell you that you need 120,000 troops, which is a lot of troops, to do whatever it is that you think you want to do. So good luck marshaling those forces, and good luck marshaling the public opinion that is necessary for that. There was an interesting piece that this guy, Mika Zenko, wrote in Foreign Policy. This back in 2012. I think I saw this on Twitter, where he suggests that there are different times where the military frames decisions of presidents by offering solutions to what they want that are either discouraging or encouraging. So, for instance, you want to be the general who the Bush administration embraces. You go and say, we can do this. 100,000 troops, 5 or 6 days. We'll wrap this thing up. You know, the toughest part will be getting the candy and flowers, scraped off our uniforms when they throw it to us in Iraq. Or you can be General Shinseki and say, this is going to cost trillions of dollars. And we shouldn't do this. And then you can then get summarily sent out to pasture. But that is basically...
This is so deep. It's a deep state.
Yeah, exactly. So that's possibly what's going on now. And, I mean, the one thing that the Trump administration seems to keep proving over and over again is that they're really unqualified, even in pursuit of their own decrepit agenda. And so hopefully their incompetence will win the day. Bolton, as much as he is positioned, presumably, to get his way and to convince Trump of something, hopefully won't be able to do it. But we shall see. I don't think, Brendan asked me when we came in today, do you think like the public has an appetite for this? And my answer is no. I'm not convinced that they understand that in the White House. And I don't know that that would be a deterrent. And I don't know, right now you have Marco Rubio calling for an investigation, calling on Barr to have an investigation of John Kerry's meeting with the Iranians, trying to convince them, I guess it was last year, not to allow the U.S. The U.S. is pulling out of the Iran nuke deal to force Iran to pick up their enrichment of uranium again. He wanted to convince them to hang in there and essentially, work with the Europeans. And Rubio wants to investigate whether John Kerry broke the Logan Act. And I'll tell you something, it's so perverse because there's so many instances of people breaking the Logan Act. I mean, Trump, I think, arguably did during the campaign. Certainly what Flynn did in the run-up to the Trump administration taking office seems to have broken the Logan Act. Jared Kushner broke the Logan Act. Others.
Is Eric Prince part of the Trump administration?
Eric Prince. This happens all the time. Now, usually it's for really horrific things. I think the Reagan administration, the people did too, is with Iran. Henry Kissinger, right? In the Paris peace talks.
Yeah, the Vietnamese Paris peace talks.
Usually when people break the Logan Act, more often than not, it is to encourage killing and more war. John Kerry was trying to salvage a deal with Iran that basically, at the time, eliminated an enemy of the United States. Made at least a one that could create real danger in the world. But of course, Marco Rubio, one of the good Republicans. Let's just take a look at this before we go into the to the fun half. In the fun half, we're going to talk about this. There's a criminal case. 4 or 5, I think, defendants found guilty in the marketing. Really, I mean, marketing is, I think, I'm underselling it, of Subsys, which was a version of fentanyl, essentially, that has been tied to the deaths of tens of thousands of people. But like even the last year, I think 28,000 people died of overdose related to synthetic opioids. And it really is horrific. It's the perfect metaphor for the pharmaceutical industry. We will get to that. We'll also talk about big story in BuzzFeed about this 14-year-old white supremacist, I guess, at least. I don't know what you would call her, alt-right YouTuber. You know, more fodder for my understanding as to why we focus on YouTube to the extent that we do. But here is Donald Trump. He is welcoming to the White House Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban is the far right-wing leader of Hungary. You remember that Seb Gorka, his dad, was part of the fascist crew in Hungary. I mean, there's a nice tradition in Hungary for far-right...
Hierarchy respecters.
Yes, exactly. Hierarchy respecters. And Orban has basically staked out the most anti-immigrant immigration and immigrant position in Europe. He his party ran on a almost an exclusively anti-immigrant platform. They have passed or they have promoted a new bill known as the Stop George Soros bill. It's part of their electoral campaign that many perceived as classically anti-Semitic.
It's the
old school.
Was that conservative from PodSave involved in that?
Oh, is that right?
No, I don't think he actually was.
No.
That was a joke.
Old school stuff. Does Donald Trump have a problem with this? You decide.
Respected all over Europe. Probably, like me, a little bit controversial, but that's okay. That's okay. You've done a good job, and you've kept your country safe. We'll be discussing NATO. As you know, Hungary is a proud member of NATO, and we are.
He's kept his country safe from... Is there some type of invasion of Hungary that I'm not aware of? Oh, apparently there is. Continue.
We've really gotten to know each other a little bit. We'll be discussing trade, very much so, and lots of other subjects. We'll be meeting with representatives of Hungary later on with the Prime Minister, and we'll spend some very good time together. So, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for being at the White House. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. Thanks.
Moments later, Trump was asked about the reports of democracy itself backsliding in Hungary. Apparently, Trump not so worried.
Are you concerned about democratic backsliding in Hungary under this prime minister?
Well, people have a lot of respect for this prime minister. He's a respected man, and I know he's a tough man, but he's a respected man, and he's done the right thing, according to many people, on immigration. And you look at some of the problems that they have in Europe that are tremendous because they've done it a different way than the prime minister.
There you go. Tough man.
Respect.
By
Democracy.
did it a different way, I mean they let Muslims come there.
That's right. Big mistake. Big mistake. All right. Well, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half of the program. Michael will join us when we get to the fun half. Oh, he doesn't want to hear it, folks. He comes in. I love it. He comes in already annoyed.
Oh, no. Happy to see you guys. happy to see you guys. Just feeling like a dog.
All right. Great. Are you okay? I can't come in today.
Stop. Jesus.
I
thought I got out of the office sickness unscathed.
Yeah. Well, that Mondaycitis is really tough. And Tuesday.
What is citis?
Mondaycitis.
Oh, Mondaycitis.
I had to get a Mondayectomy.
Yeah.
Like, is your sickness only active on Mondays?
That's really weird. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Just a reminder, your support is what makes this show possible. You can become a member of the show by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, not only do you support the free show, not only do you get extra content every day, but you also get that content commercial free, and you keep this show alive. So jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, Just Coffee, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And Michael, you're here. So I guess the show is happening tonight.
Oh, no. It's canceled. Psych.
Oh, all right, great.
No, yes. Emma Vigeland will be in. And it'll be a great show. 7 o'clock, Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel, patreon.com.
Sounds like it's going to be great. You sound really up for it.
I'm working on it. I'm going to drink a bunch of, what is our sponsor again?
Liquid IV.
Liquid IV. I'm going to pump myself full of Liquid IV.
That we all drink all the time.
It's going to be great. 7 o'clock, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube, patreon.com/TMBS. And next week, we're going to do the food bucket to celebrate the 2,000 patrons.
So how are we cooking that stuff?
We're going to have to. I don't think we have to. It's
ready to go.
Survival bucket, bro.
Survival.
Just pick it out of the bucket.
You may not have a heat source.
What we're going to do is we're going
to order.
What do you
think there's raw what?
You know what we're going to do is we're going to order Chipotle and pretend it's the food
bucket.
Bucket.
What do you think there's raw?
Like, whoa, this food bucket tastes pretty good.
I was hoping
tastes like
there
a
was,
burrito bowl.
I don't know. Can't you like beef jerky or something like that? I mean, I guess you don't have to
You're going to cook beef jerky?
Yeah, good point. I was expecting it to be like sort of burrito bowl type stuff. Maybe heat it up in a microwave or something.
That this
good.
No, it's like dehydrated eggs.
Michael, I found out how we're gonna make it go viral on YouTube.
How?
Is we tag it with the term mukblog. Mukbang. Sorry, mukbang.
This is a good idea.
Because that's a South Korean thing that they just film them eating and talking, and it's like hundreds of thousands of views.
I don't necessarily know that I want that to get hundreds of thousands.
No,
of
we
views,
do.
but
We definitely want it to
All
get
right.
hundreds of thousands of views.
All right, beautiful. Let's do that, and yeah. See you tonight.
Don't forget, check out patreon.com/theintifada. Jamie is also ill. She's got Tuesdayitis. And Matt?
I do my illnesses over the weekend, like a good worker.
Very inefficient.
I have a feeling you're going to have a Wednesday apectomy.
Yeah, but that's a scheduled one. That's a
Wednesday
Wednesdayectomy. I'm going to take Michael down. Literary Hangover Hiawatha. We are closing up on 2 hundo for patrons. We're going to do Margaret Fuller, who was an early socialist and feminist. I mean, you probably put the feminist part first, but she became a socialist in the 1848 revolutions. And a lot of people don't know about her, so we're going to try to bring her to more and more people.
She was part of the Concord crew.
She's coming
right?
back.
Yeah, she outgrew them. Emerson was sort of like stuck in his individualist thing, and Fuller was even romantically a little bit tied to Emerson, although nothing happened. But then Fuller outgrew Emerson's individualism when she was in Europe. So we're going to record that on Wednesday, actually. So look forward to that. So patreon.com/literary hangover for those guys.
All right. See you in the fun half, 646-257-3920. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You nervous? You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
Do.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
For radio. Very well done. To do.
Very, very well done.
Oh,
as
thank
always.
You. All right, we're going to take, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. I assume that you've seen the latest report polling that shows that Bernie Sanders has lost a little bit of support amongst young people. Have you seen that?
Is there a particular story, or? I mean, that's. I mean, every poll you can measure it on every poll. So I mean, is there a particular story that's addressing that?
I just saw a morning consult poll that shows that Bernie's support has dropped from 45 to 33% from March to May. Some of that went to Biden. Some of that went to Warren, maybe a little bit to Harris. Biden has picked up a bunch of it. What's your sense of that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I could see that happening a little bit, but I mean, one of the big controversies, with the Monmouth poll that came out on Thursday. In fact, Bernie himself addressed this on Al Sharpton's show on Saturday afternoon when he was interviewing him, was about the actual numbers of people who were polled under 50 years old, according to exit polls from New Hampshire in 2016. It was 50-50, and according to Monmouth pollster Patrick Murray, it's basically 33%, with 67% going to 50 and older. And so, those are incredibly large discrepancies
in terms of what they're sampling. So the estimation of who the electorate will look like is very different.
Right. Now, Mr. Murray is basing this on what he calls, let's see, what is it? Trying to find it here. It's, he's saying that it's based on validated voter rolls, because, what they're saying is that that exit polls basically favor younger voters, and there have been many articles written about this also that say the same thing. And so, a lot of it's just perception. I think that younger voters are, basically, you have to think, what is the average age of the voter in New Hampshire? And 50 seems like a pretty reasonable number as opposed to about 60.
Right.
That does not seem right.
I have no idea.
But that's just his opinion.
All right. So in other words, there's a lot of noise in the polls right now, is your point.
Yeah, sure. There's just we'll see as time goes on. I listened to Brianna Joy Gray yesterday put out a thing with Ben Tolshin, who's the pollster for Bernie, and he criticized also the SRS poll, and which I don't necessarily agree with. And there are some other things I didn't agree with him about. New Hampshire polling was actually pretty accurate. There are a couple of that were pretty good. A University of New Hampshire poll and the Marist poll, which actually predicted it fairly well. But anyway, it's definitely worth listening to, and it's a good podcast by Brianna Joy Gray. So I definitely would recommend that. So I also enjoyed A Ring of Fire this weekend, like I usually do. In the second segment with Digby, you talked about the cost of not impeaching could be greater than the cost of impeaching. Here's a quote from you. If people listen, and I'll add, read to the first two chapters of public opinion of the Mueller report, public opinion will be severely in favor of impeaching this guy. Here's my theory about this. Democrats are missing a massive opportunity, and I do think the cost of not impeaching is growing in terms of the most informed and most active voters. Nancy Pelosi can come out and say, we're not going to remove the president because the Republicans are going to stand in our way. They're going to obstruct. But we're going to impeach as part of the job that we have been sent here to do. Part of this job was sent here to do is to do the people's business. Part of the people's business is holding lawbreakers to account. We're going to impeach the president. If the Republicans stop him and keep him in office, that's on them. But if we're going to hold the president to account, if the full-blown impeachment is perceived as a censure, at the very least we're going to, on the record, that lawbreaking is illegal and that the servants of the people, we're here to tell you that you can't do that. We can't help it if the Republicans decide to orchestrate a jailbreak, as it were, on them. The bottom line is look at the writing on the wall, make the decision now, and shift into a focus of how we're going to do this and maintain the political objectives we have to holding to say into account and convincing people that this is the right thing to do and turn this into a political positive instead of perceiving this as a liability.
John, did you transcribe that whole thing? Was those my words on Ring of Fire?
Yeah, sometimes you repeat yourself sometimes,
right,
like one
true.
sentence is very
right,
similar
to
another, so I left out that
part.
part.
I appreciate
yeah.
that. Yeah, all right. But that was very nice. But I appreciate that. Yeah, no, that's my sentiment. I do think that there is a way for the Democrats to frame this in a way that can be both. Well, look, putting aside the question of should we hold lawbreakers to account when they're in our government, which I think is obviously yes. I also think that there is a politically successful way of doing it, and that I've laid it out there, more specifically, I think probably than I have on this program, where Nancy Pelosi should say, we're going to do this. We know that it's a futile act, but we need to hold him to account. People can perceive it as a censure because we know that he's not going to be removed from office. Lower the expectations of what an impeachment will do, so that you're not perceived as trying to, you're not perceived as Don Quixote, but rather you're perceived as like, are just impeaching. even with the knowledge that the Senate will not do it, and it'll be on them, that they don't hold him to account for his law breaking and his abuse of office. And you say, but we need to do that because we need the American public and future presidents to know that you can't do this. And I think the process itself will, I think, be very helpful for Democrats as a political question. I think it's also going to be helpful for the country in terms of holding powerful people to account. And I think it's going to be damaging to Senate Republicans. I think the last thing in the world they want is to have all this stuff aired in a way that captures the public imagination and then be the ones who stop it.
Okay, but you will acknowledge it's quite a turnaround from the 3 debates that we had, right? I mean, your position in the 3 debates.
No. My position in the debates was more about a fear of impeaching prior to a 2020 win. But but following the release of the report and following all the obstruction, I think there is really no choice. In terms.
But isn't that the prediction? The prediction that I made was that the phrase that I kept using was overwhelming evidence. And so, I mean, now I wouldn't. The evidence is fairly overwhelming.
I don't think
now.
It's just in the report too. I think it's also in their refusal to allow for congressional oversight. I mean, I think it's right. The denying of the subpoenas. I think it's the denying of the unredacted report. I think all of that is are grounds for impeachment.
Right. I mean, also, you and Jink were also talking about how the most likely way you thought Trump was going to have damage done to him was through investigations into money laundering, and none of that is even happening.
Right? Well, there's a subpoena out for Deutsche Bank, and presumably that's what that's about. And the Trump administration has sued to stop that. I mean, presumably that's what's going on there.
Okay, well, I mean, I just want to say that I think that you were pretty passionate about your opinion in our debates, and
I don't, to be honest with you, totally remember what the debate was, but you win, John. I mean, I don't know, but I
think we're going to declare this one for you, John, and we're going to keep it moving.
Nevertheless, I think
anyway,
we're in agreement now, John. I think is what the
John, I'm sorry, I was frog. There you go, Sam.
Okay, I'll accept that.
All right, well, that was Michael.
All right, Sam.
Appreciate it.
I also have a little bit of a disagreement with you on the Senate races,
All right, well, why don't we save that for tomorrow?
I don't want to go for 0 for 2 today, John.
Thanks. I got to lick my wounds, buddy.
I needed to help wrap that up.
Pretty passionate, Sam.
Yeah. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Ronald Reagan. How are you?
Well, you could have saved us a bunch of time if you just admit you were wrong once in a while.
No way this show's going to last 3 hours
Jesus
a day.
Christ.
I wasn't I wasn't sure where that was going, but yeah.
Real quick, going back to the beginning of Setgate, I think that's what Studio Gate.
Oh,
that's
Studio
what we're calling
Gate.
it.
Okay.
David Pakman.
Right.
David Pakman's big defense has been that he just moved and he's going to be making changes to his studio. Well, he did recently make some changes. He changed some of his panels to sort of an orangish red.
Is that right?
Only making it look more like your studio. And I just think we have kind of a Daenerys Targaryen situation on our hands where your strength of being a nice, non-litigious guy is perceived as weakness by your enemies, and everyone thinks you're a big pussy now because you refuse to put your foot down.
Do we have a
when
screenshot
there
of
were some...
Pacman's most recent?
I mean, he's just straight
People
up trolling
I
you
don't
at this
see
point.
any orange. I'm not getting reports of any new of any non-blue colors in his backdrop.
So basically, you're just gonna let it stand.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, first I come
You
for
know.
love, and if I don't get that, then I guess I got to go with fear.
But the people don't
Yeah,
respect me
well-
no matter what I do.
It's just kind of embarrassing, but that's okay.
Wait, this feels like fake news, Reagan. I'm not seeing any change to his set.
Well, it's true. I saw it. It's on the internet, and I don't know what to say.
All right.
I'll find a screenshot.
Yeah, you better.
I
Next
just wanted
time,
to
come with a
say,
screenshot.
yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
Now that I got the important stuff out of the way.
Great.
So we raised a bunch of money for a bond last year, and it took me a while, but I finally got the 501c3 all set up. So the money is, in the future, when we raise more money, it'll be tax deductible.
Great.
And we raised more than what we needed, so we're sitting on about $4,000 right now. And I put out an email to the American Immigration Lawyers Association Washington State listserv, sort of asking for people to send me referrals of anyone who might need assistance or help. So that's all moving forward. There's a website. It's pretty basic at this point, but it's northwestbondfund.org, O-R-G.
Northwestbondfund.org. Okay. And just to explain to what people this is, just explain again what it is for folks.
Yeah, so basically I was in a position last year of having a client who I really felt passionately about, but he got a bond set of $15,000, and there was just no way they were going to be able to come up with the money. So we raised the money, but when you pay a bond like that, the money goes into sort of like a government savings account, and it accumulates interest. And then if you win, or if the client is deported and they leave the country, the money is returned to you. And I didn't want to be sitting here with $15,000 of other people's money like 3 or 4 years down the road. So we set up an organization. There's articles of incorporation, and it's now a 501c3. So that when the money comes back, it's not coming back to me, the money is actually in the name of this nonprofit, and it'll just go back to paying bonds for other people. I set up and just so people know, I set up the articles of incorporation so that I'm not taking any money. I could, nonprofits do a sneaky thing sometimes where it's like it's not for profit, and my salary is $500,000 a year. I'm not taking any money at all from the fund to pay myself. And if the fund ever folds, I set it up so the money will be donated to the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. So there's no back-end windfall for me. That'd be nice, but that's not how it's set up. But I just wanted people to know that because I know it's
allegedly
been a while. It's taken me a minute to get it set up. Well, you can. I'm sure you can find all that information on the internet. But I can point people in the direction of the articles.
This does look pretty problematic.
Oh, all right, just hold on. He's talking.
Right.
No.
Well,
Michael was talking about an image. All right, so give us the website again.
Yeah, so it's the it's northwestbondfund.org.
All right, we'll put that into the podcast.
We don't have it set up to we don't have it set up to take rolling donations. If we find another case, what we're going to do is just launch another GoFundMe, and then maybe have a GoFundMe that's not attached to an individual, so that if we need to do anonymous donations moving forward, that'd be possible. But if people want information, that's where it's at. So.
All right, great. And
thanks for making that happen. That was really you who helped promote that and made that all possible. So.
Well, good for you for doing it. All right, but let's return back to more critical issues, and we will put a link to the bond fund page in our podcast and our YouTube description. We do have an image of David Pakman and a new set. Is this accurate? What is this picture?
Well, this is from Dark Marin on Twitter. So
this could be edited.
It looks a little suspicious.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess this is the. We're going to air it, and we'll have our forensic experts look into it. But there looks like some orange accents on the left side of his.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, not looks like, it is orange accents on the left side. Now, that's not clear to me that it's actually his set, but if it is getting really problematic. Really problematic. So
the problem is you set the tone. You already set the tone, and then it's going to be real hard for you to go. Full hashtag spoiler alert, Daenerys season 8, episode 5.
Well, as my attorney,
you're going to get a lot of
make it happen. As my attorney, you'll make it happen. All right. Appreciate the call. Just start getting the paperwork ready.
Right.
Bye. One more call. 256. You're calling from a 256 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, yeah, this is Micah. I'm calling from Alabama, actually.
Micah from Alabama. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I'm curious the difference in between a democratic socialist and a social democrat. I am a big supporter of Bernie Sanders, AOC, a lot of the things they've been putting out there. But whenever I started going on the internet and kind of like looking into it more, getting real deep into it, I've been kind of hit by this strange dichotomy to where it's like, oh, no, that's just the first step before we start going full socialist. And I'm like, wait, whoa. Just kind of confused on it. I want to kind of get your opinion about it.
Well, some democratic socialists want, are looking to do what you've talked about.
Abolish private property, for instance.
Yeah. Or, I mean, I don't know how full on, where on the spectrum they would end in terms of, how much private property or whether it would just be major industry. But essentially, social democrats are not necessarily looking to wipe out capitalism, but are looking to increase the amount of socialism. And look, we have a mixed economy as it is right now, right? We don't necessarily acknowledge it in sort of the mainstream, but Social Security, Medicare, other program, the VA. I mean, we have socialism in this country.
Absolutely.
We have a mix.
Even the 2008 bailout would be considered a socialist stuff.
I think social democrats are looking to increase that balance, and where they land, I don't think it's specific, and so it's a matter of degree. Everybody's got a different agenda, but it's funny. I'm going to talk about Air America on another podcast soon. And so I was going back and trying to find any time I had talked about it on the air, and I came across a video. And we're gonna I think clip this interview and play it on a different thing. But I heard an interview I did with Chris Hayes back, I think like in 2008 or 2009. And he had written a piece about the failure of the Democrats. This is, in the wake of the Obama election, to take any type of legislative action that would increase their power. And in the context of that article that he wrote called "System Failure," I think it was, he tells the story of a German social democrat who explained, who told a parable to explain, what their agenda was in terms of, these social democrats may seek to completely eliminate capitalism and have a fully socialist state. And the parable he explained was the story of I think it was a farmer who had half a dozen sons. And upon his death, he was worried about them. And so he told them, there is a pile of gold, a huge treasure of gold in the fields, buried in the fields. Go find it. And the sons basically dug up every part of the fields looking for that gold. They never found it because it wasn't there, but what they ended up doing was tilling the soil so effectively that it provided for all of them in terms of their sustenance. And that parable is, I think sort of the driving factor. You aim for a North Star, and along the way, it gets you good things.
Can I just add did you listen to Friday's show with Bhaskar Sunkara by any chance?
I did not know.
So I would read his book, and I think that, there's a huge amount of sort of variability, but I do think like one thing that you will see in this social democratic socialist continuum is I would look up Olof Palme. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, which I should at this point, but he was a former Swedish prime minister who helped build the Swedish social model. And I mean, basically what I would say the difference does come down to if you're talking on the continuum of democratic socialist versus social democrat. Democratic socialists don't want to abolish private property or all private enterprise, but they do want to inject a great deal more democracy into the workplace. So as an example, Volvo was actually a union company at one point, and there was really serious plans to make the sort of ownership structure of major Swedish corporations much more democratic in nature in terms of elected representation and shared sort of stakeholder value. So and then also look up the Madrigon collectives in Spain. That will give you a sense of what some of the differences are. It's all in a continuum because it was a social democratic government, but they were interested in injecting more democracy into greater parts of the economy. And there are some distinctions there. And Sanders actually did support enterprises like that when he was mayor of Burlington.
Okay. Yeah. My main thing is that it just seems like, anytime that you listen to the media, you get a lot of back and forth of, Bernie Sanders wants to turn the United States into Cuba. And then you get a response of course not. He wants to turn it into something closer to Sweden, And the thing that I've been getting, though,
I can assure you that Bernie Sanders does not want to turn the United States into Cuba.
I mean, the Cuba conversation is worth having on its own right, but that's a ludicrous talking point, and you can let go of any worries about the Cuban model here.
Right. No. I understand that his goal is not exactly, to just get the United States into Cuba. But the thing that does get me, though, is that whenever they say, oh, no, he wants to get it in Sweden, there could be an argument where it's like, okay, well, that's actually a social democratic state, not a democratic socialist state.
Well, I mean, look, you can get into the semantics of this, but you also, I mean, a president does not have the ability to do any of what you're talking about.
We are now in Cuba.
Without Congress and the judiciary. I mean, I think like the idea is that regardless of who we elected as president, I don't think that there's an individual in the country who we could elect as president who would be able to move this country to Sweden. I mean, into a Swedish model. The point is broad principles about how democratic of a country we should have, who the economy should work for, right? And how we define that, and what role government should have in society. These are broad principles that, obviously will commingle with other principles that are contrary to that. So I think the idea of fearing that Bernie Sanders is going to be too radical for the country, I mean, if you think it is too radical of an idea to expand a program that serves 1/4 of the population right now to serving essentially, 15/16 of the population, then maybe you should be concerned about Bernie Sanders. But beyond that, I would say no. Short of that, I don't think that's going to be there. There's nothing that Bernie Sanders is going to do, and I would love it if it was the case, that's going to be any more radical than what FDR did. So I appreciate the call.
He's not setting up our revolution.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I would not be too concerned.
We are now Cuba.
I think Bernie should set up our revolution as a sort of shadow government, and on day one be like, sorry, not going to do any of that Supreme Court stuff or nothing.
Like, it's an outside paramilitary, and also, I just declared us a democratic socialist state. There's literally nothing that anybody could do. It's presidential decree. I minted it on a coin, and you all could go fuck yourselves.
I want to talk about this story. It didn't get much attention. There's a story of 44 states that are suing. There's just a lot of civil and criminal activity that's happening around, obviously, the drug makers. And, at this point, it seems like it would be a radical idea to not nationalize the production of a lot of drugs and to inhibit and to not intensely regulate this industry. The amount of criminality, the amount of market failure, the amount of collusion amongst drug makers would make it almost a radical idea to not dramatically increase regulation and to produce our own generics. We have a case where 44 state attorney generals are suing generic drug makers over price collusion. We have the ongoing stories about Purdue Pharmaceuticals and the Sacklers, who are looking at potential criminal liability for the way that they marketed and produced with the knowledge that they were basically selling a highly addictive substance to people under claims that it was otherwise. This story is just stunning. One of the other drugs that was out there that was also an opioid, or at least a synthetic opioid, that the CDC says was responsible for more than 28,000 deaths in 2017 alone. I mean, think about this. You have 28,000 deaths. What is the algorithm? How many of those deaths correlate to just incredible suffering and destruction of lives? How many people did not die and who are addicted to these substances? And it's destroyed their lives. It's destroyed their families. It's destroyed their future. And this is just, it's stunning. It is a case, it's a criminal case of essentially the top executives of a company called Insys that made Subsys, which is a spray version of fentanyl. And I have a good friend who got addicted to fentanyl, and fortunately survived, but was very lucky. And there were five executives who were found guilty on racketeering charges because they bribed doctors to prescribe the painkiller to people who didn't need it. These drugs were developed to deal with the most acute cases of pain, basically cancer victims. And what the companies that produced these things did was basically tell doctors, like, there's a guy down the street who started to prescribe these for, you're recovering from surgery, you've got back pain. And they're making a lot of money. And that's basically what happened. It was approved by the FDA in 2012 only for cancer patients who had recurring pain. And they started to do off-label marketing for this. So these guys were convicted. And one of the things that came out in the course of the case, I'll read some of this to you, was that they produced a rap video that involved a couple of the executives dressed as rappers. They were singing it. It is very professionally done. They also introduce a bottle of Subsys that is like the inhaler, essentially. The video is titled Great by Choice. It was meant to train sales representatives to push Subsys, to not worry about the stuff, as it were, basically. In fact, one of the executives who was found guilty dressed as the spray bottle. And they pled guilty to participating in the scheme to bribe doctors. The bribes included stuff like getting lap dances for the doctors, taking them out to dinners.
Competition starts kicking in.
$2,000 per person dinners. Apparently, at one point, there was panic in one executive who shouted from his office about the company keeping track of how much money Insys was making off of doctors who were paid speakers. They would go to conferences and be paid by Insys without revealing that they were being paid by Insys. And Insys had a record of how much money they were making out of these doctors' offices. He was in his office screaming, "We're all going to jail." And it turned out he was correct. But this is just gives you the mentality of, and really, honestly, like, I don't know. These guys, the only difference between these guys and the pharmaceutical industry writ large is these guys are on the cutting edge of marketing and just a little bit more hip in their minds. We're going to really, we got to project baller status to our sales reps. And here is some of that video. We have sped up just a little bit so that we don't get dinged on YouTube, but here it is.
Start discussing substance, yes, Lord. I don't know if it's an option, but before your first script, we need to print you out of opting out, please. I love titrations, yeah, that's not a problem. And I got new patients, and I got a lot of them.
Pause it. I love titration, and it's not a problem. That is how you get off of a substance that is physically addictive. So they're saying, like, yeah, don't worry. The titration is going to be easy. I got a lot of patients, and I've got even more of them. This is where the Subsys bottle shows up.
Bad, well, I'm the baddest. I was created in the lab in the land of the cactus. Debated, I'm the man in the city, can't match this. Even if you ran and you plan and you practice, I will still overlap you on this track too. As a matter of fact, while I shatter this rap, let's shatter and grasp my delivery. It's giving me 38% of this industry plus my bioavailability. I'm built to last, y'all can't get rid of me. I'd even be sick of me, but attacking me is actually practically just silly as comparing Antigone. Y'all sick of me. This ain't no fight at all. If you're
Pause it. 38% of the industry at this point. They had already, the Subsys bottle had already cornered. Go ahead.
I'll substitute you like it was xylitol. High beast.
I love titrations, yeah, that's not a problem. And I got new patients and I got a lot.
This is a good thing to remember when executives say that they work like 80 hours a week.
Right.
I love titrations, yeah, that's not a problem. And I got new patients and I got a lot of them. If you want to be great, listen to my voice. You can be great, but it's your choice. I love titrations, yeah, that's not a problem. And I got new patients and I got a lot of them. I love titrations, yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It was very motivational.
Super
Competition
motivation.
would start kicking in.
Right. There you go. It's all happening,
Not a
folks.
straight player.
So those guys are going to go to jail. And hopefully more of them will. And then hopefully we're going to have just the profit motive is the same across the board with these people. And so, you know, the last concern that anyone should have is that we're going to become too socialized in the context of how we regulate and maybe produce drugs.
You don't think these guys and Martin Shkreli are just bad apples?
Right. Well, you know, the one of the greatest myths is that one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch. In fact, it literally does. One bad apple, which is why you should not keep your apples in a plastic bag in your refrigerator. You should separate them and try and, because they excrete, as they go bad, they excrete a gas which causes other apples to go bad. So keep that in mind. One bad apple does, in fact,
This video was like that gas.
spoil the whole bunch, indeed. Speaking of a bad apple, years ago, Michael debated a British gentleman who is now apparently running for a member of parliament in England, into the UKIP party. And apparently some people have taken issue with his sense of humor. He was at one point, this guy Sargon of Akkad.
Carl of Swinton.
Yes. He was making jokes about raping a female member of parliament. This was, well, I mean,
The husting.
making jokes is a very broad term. But he claimed he was making jokes about raping a member of parliament. But the joke, not necessarily terribly sophisticatedly constructed. Here is a clip of that. This is from 2016.
I thought feminism was about empowering women. Oh my God, the trolls, the terrible harassment. Won't someone think of the women? I know the feeling. It's not the viciousness of attacks I get on the internet that bothers me.
Pause it. He is reading a statement from this member of parliament.
Yeah, Jess Phillips.
Yes, and here is his. He is one of those intellectual dark web type of guys who you know, your feelings don't care about the facts, or the facts don't care about your feelings, and he's very reasoned in his arguments, apparently.
I know the feeling. It's not the viciousness of attacks I get on the internet that bothers me. People talking about raping me isn't fun, but has become somewhat par for the course. Well, I'll tell you what, Jess, I think that's terrible. And you know what? I wouldn't even rape you. I wouldn't even rape you. Not even. What is a real pain is the...
Okay, so that's his big joke. I would not even rape you, which we've heard actually, you know, I think Donald Trump and Bolsonaro have all made various versions of theirs. But here he is, subsequent to that, that caused a little bit of controversy. And so subsequent to that, I'm not sure, when was the second video? It was subsequent to that. He was, I don't know where he was, on the coast somewhere, doing a live stand-up into camera report on the apparently controversy, and he clarified his position.
There's been an awful lot of talk about whether I would or would not even rape Jess Phillips. I've been in a lot of trouble for my hardline stance of not even raping her. I suppose with enough pressure I might cave, but let's be honest, nobody's got that much beer.
There you go. The old, I won't even do her the favor of raping her joke. Hilarious. And here he is, like most right-wingers. He's on is this on the BBC?
Yeah, BBC Southwest.
He's on BBC Southwest. He's now running for a member of parliament and is just completely offended that anyone would actually talk about that joke that he, as a grown man, was willing to own a couple of years ago, but now apparently his ambitions have changed in some way. And he doesn't want to have to own that sentiment, or even apparently even seemingly apologize for it.
Anything can be joked about. That's the point. That's the reason we have jokes, is to remove the horror from a particularly negative thing. That's why British troops survived so well in the trenches in World War I and II. They were famous for their dark humour to help them cope with life and cope with the terrible things that happened.
Pause it for 1 second. So, Sargon of Akkad is arguing that the reason why he was joking about why he wouldn't even rape this MP had to do with the horrible situation that I guess we're all in. Who's in the horrible situation that he's making these jokes to make it easier?
It was like in World War I when both sides came together in no man's land and started telling rape jokes.
You remember all of those? Remember that was what Dunkirk was like, watching a dice routine. We all know about this.
So now he's not only a comedian,
dice without the irony,
an expert at rape jokes. He's also an academic about comedy. Here we go.
Why British troops survived so well in the trenches in World War I and II. They were famous for their dark humour to help them cope with life and cope with the terrible things that happened.
They were joking about something awful that was going on around them. You've conjured up the notion of raping a woman, a named woman.
No, that's
You've
not
created
true.
a problem for her.
Even. I said that I would not even do it. This was a joke at Jess's expense. That was, don't get me wrong, it was a mean thing to say.
There was also a sideswipe, presumably, at her appearance in that, or, her attractiveness in your eyes. What has any of this got to do with politics? That's the point. You were standing for election. She's an elected politician.
Why are you bringing it up?
Well, because you say these things. I mean, if you just decided to engage with Jess Phillips or any other politician on Brexit or the health service or defence or the economy, none of this would have arisen. You're saying highly controversial things, and then you're expressing surprise that people take issue with it.
I am expressing surprise that you will actually lie about the way I said something to rile up radically left-wing activists, to then come and attack me in the streets of Truro and call it a scuffle that broke out. It didn't break out. We were attacked. That's a totally deterministic way of viewing it, as if these left-wing activists had no responsibility for their own actions, as if us going there to have a dialogue and asking them to talk is us being just as culpable as them when they attack us.
Okay.
It's unreal the way that you frame these things.
Okay, I just want to invite some comment from other guests. So, Molly, what's your thinking?
Well, I won't comment directly on what your other guest said, because that will legitimise his misogyny and his racism. But I've done quite a study of the rise of the far right, and it's very clear that these type of tactics of provoking victimhood, provoking violence, making attacks, creating controversy is a tool that they use deliberately, creating division. I represent people across the southwest in minority communities, ethnic minority communities, who are very fearful about rise in hate crime and hate speech, and my job is to be in solidarity with them and to resist all this kind of behaviour.
Okay, Ashley Fox.
I think the comments are disgusting, and I'd much rather talk about the European elections than a fringe candidate.
Okay, well, that's the plan for the rest of the programme.
There you go.
Wow. There's a lot of whining that I was mean to him.
Right. Everybody's mean to him. Everybody's so mean. Is there like some type of course where all these right-wingers are going now, where they just basically, when you find yourself in an interview and people are actually just holding you to account for your positions or what you've stated, you make sure that you make this about some type of unfair malignment and unfair,
well, Andrew Neil should have been open about his membership in the DSA Libertarian Socialist Caucus and Momentum before he introduced.
Well, we saw the same thing with Farage yesterday and Shapiro, and now we see this with Sargon of Akkad. It's all about the left wingers. They made me do it.
He lies actually earlier in that clip. He says that the joke was made only in the closed environment of his YouTube, but he was tweeting out the link to it. He tweeted at the woman saying, "Hey Jess, I wouldn't even rape you." Like,
what does that mean? The closed environment of his YouTube show?
Well, what they're saying is, if you would buy the fact that these jokes are like jokes and funny, then like you should know what you're going when you go to a Sargon of Akkad channel. But like he's tweeting this out in public forums, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and YouTube itself is fairly public.
What does that even mean? Like, I mean, it's not, Howard Stern for years got in trouble for what he was doing, and he went into literally a closed loop where there was a subscriber base. And no one's saying that he can't say these things. If he wants to have his own pay-per-view channel and nobody hears it except for people who have paid for it, or even if he wants to have his own YouTube channel and YouTube is okay with a comedian who has such finesse and expertise when it comes to rape jokes, that's his right. But the idea that you can then enter into the public discourse and be able to disown that part of what has got you to that seat.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean, that's why he's sitting there. It's not because he came up with I just dubbed myself Sargon of Akkad. I had no shows and I just show up and I start running for this. And that's why I'm on TV. Ben Shapiro shows up and it doesn't, I don't need to account for the fact that I called, any Jews who don't subscribe to my narrow perspective on Judaism as not real Jews. The idea that, Mike Cernovich can go on Dave Rubin's show, and Dave Rubin, who supposedly is so concerned about decorum and about non-smearing and smear merchants. And Dave Rubin is going to go around going like, I'm not responsible for these things. I mean, you're all adults. You're all effing adults. You're responsible. You want to move into other segments of public discourse, own what you've said, and either renounce it and explain where that came from and where you are now on such a thing. It's not enough that Ben Shapiro I've got a page where I say the dumb things I've said on social media. Well, it's not just a question of dumb things. I want to know when Ben Shapiro writes, the Jewish people has always been plagued by bad Jews who undermine it within. In America, those bad Jews largely vote Democrat. Now, 75% of Jews vote for Democrats, at least. And so now he's saying those bad Jews largely vote Democrat. So he's saying that the majority of bad Jews who exist, he won't say how many of those are, vote Democrat. So either there's a small number of bad Jews, according to him, and they just add to the overwhelming number of good Jews who vote Democrat. But I would like him to basically explain to me what constitutes a bad Jew in his mind, and where in Judaism is there anything, any doctrine that suggests that Ben Shapiro has any authority to determine who is a good Jew and a bad Jew. I mean, this is, frankly, anti-Semitic. I mean, I would like to hear an explanation of how many Jews does he think are bad?
The ones that aren't Orthodox, according to him.
Has he said that?
I feel like that's what he said.
He went to the border.
Yeah,
I mean, he went to the border of that. He went to the border. And I think also any Jew voted for Obama, he's also gone to the border of.
I mean, he is calling the majority of Jews in this country bad. Certainly the majority of Jews that exist, bad. I find that disgusting. And I would like to see him held to account. Look, there is a long history, or certainly a history amongst all peoples, of other people who are willing to attempt to claim superiority and determine who is a good Muslim or a bad Muslim or a good Jew or a bad Jew. I mean, in Catholicism, at least there is some type of structure ostensibly where, supposedly the Pope can do this. We have no Pope in Judaism. The rabbi is not in charge of people. We live as Jews now under a rabbinic Jewish tradition that started in Yavna some 3,000 years ago, 2,000, where are we? I don't know, 2,000 some odd years ago. And the idea that Ben Shapiro is out there dictating who he says are good Jews and bad Jews, and this is disgusting. This is frankly, things that the Sonderkommandos did, right? Yeah. I'm offended. I would like to hear an explanation for these things, not just that it was a dumb tweet. That's not the ticket to. I want this guy held to account to explain what he means. Bad Jews. That is, look. I want to talk about anti-Semitic trope. Bad Jews? I don't know. People like that should be held to account. Speaking of just bad people, here is Georgia Senator David Perdue trying to justify. And, Georgia now, there is a call for a boycott. Georgia is a center for production, film and TV production in the country. North Carolina has some. Georgia has some. The Walking Dead is shot down there, and the other shows.
Former episode or last season of Queer Eye.
Atlanta.
Yep, Atlanta has a lot of production. Turner Broadcasting down there, and this abortion bill that is passed in Georgia, which is not in effect yet, but there was could prevent victims of rape from getting an abortion. Would effectively ban abortion for the vast majority of women who don't find out that they're pregnant until usually 5 or 6 weeks at least after they become pregnant. This is a bill that would criminalize women leaving the state to go to a state where abortion is legal. And the way they're justifying it now, for a long time they tried to do it with late-term abortions. And the fact is that there's so few of those that are in any way elected. And to the extent that they are elective, they are only done so, obviously, with the consent of a doctor, of a medical practitioner. They now have created this myth of infanticide, of children that have been born and parents decide, I don't want the kid now, and we're going to kill it. As opposed to some babies that are born with the full knowledge that they will not survive and come out either in writhing pain or severely debilitated and cannot be maintained. Their life cannot be maintained. And that happens obviously very rarely. It's very painful. And in certain instances, these children that the mother is given the choice, do you want it to be recorded as a live birth or not a live birth? Because the baby basically is born dying, with death imminent, as opposed to theoretical, ultimately going to die. But this has become a talking point for them because they know they're losing this battle.
It's definitely in the forefront of our minds now.
Absolutely.
I think it backfired on those Democrats when they all said you can have an abortion even after the baby's born, or kill the baby after the baby's born. So,
well, Ainsley, that's what's so
pause
ironic.
Pause it. That's
incredible.
This is
This
is Fox and Friends, where Ainsley Earhardt is basically saying Democrats are in favor of infanticide, which incidentally is illegal.
when they all said you can have an abortion even after the baby's born or kill the baby after the baby's born. So,
well, Ainsley, that's what's so ironic. We're talking about this law in Georgia. Nobody's even talking about what has just been passed in a state by the Democrats. I mean, that is outrageous. Infanticide is where they have gotten to. This regime on their side has gotten so radical that they think that's okay.
Well, Georgia's taking a stand.
Yeah. It's, I mean, the Republican Party, it's just like, you know.
They're psychopaths.
Psychopaths. Complete psychopaths.
Show me a little white baby. Another sacrifice. I wish I could abort a white baby till they were your age, Sam.
Meanwhile, speaking of grifts, Candace Owens out at Turning Points USA. Unclear why, what led to that separation between, it's possible she might feel that she can make more money out on her own, and
might have something to do with the fact that certain chapters were complaining about her presence and prominence at TPUSA following her Hitler nationalism comments.
That could have. It also could be that she has, has been too Hitler friendly. Although, maybe she got sick of stuff like what seems to be a real rash of coincidental eruptions of white supremacy amongst specific chapters of Turning Points USA.
Leaders of the chapters.
Leaders of the chapters. And really, there's nothing else except for the chapters. I mean, of course, Charlie Kirk goes around to say hi to the chapters. But that's what it's all about, right? It's all about the actual schools. The latest is Las Vegas, the University of Nevada, I think it was.
UNLV.
And, of course, we've seen these problems. I think they were in Florida, they had problems. And actually in the executive leadership, I think initially there was also some major white supremacy problems.
Yep.
Things like texts or whatever it is, their internal Discord channel, essentially like, hey, make sure you don't hate on Jews for no reason. Because there's nothing worse than hating on the Jews for no reason when there's so many reasons. But here is Candace Owens. Tapping into where the big money lies, and that is in the circle jerk, that is the IDW, and with Dennis Prager. This is it's branded by both organizations, so I'm not sure whose show it is, if it's a PragerU show or the Candace Owens show.
I think the Candace Owens show exists under the
PragerU umbrella. Yes, I'm not. That's not surprising, and here is Prager, obviously famous for bringing on folks like Dave Rubin, saying it's so helpful that you identify as a liberal because it helps from a marketing perspective. And Dave Rubin was like, wait a second, you're undercutting my sales pitch.
I'm not doing that for you.
You're saying the quiet part loud. What's going on? And here's Candace Owens making her pitch as to how she can effectively make the overwhelmingly white audience for Prager University feel good about themselves and their racism.
What's scary to me is not that they're preaching this lunacy, but that some people are grasping onto it. Some people said to me when I got engaged, my fiance is white. I can't believe you're marrying a white man. And what I said back to them, my retort was, why don't we just put back in the laws where blacks and whites can't marry?
Well, let me ask you. I'll bet you those who said that are all black.
That's correct. That's what I mean.
Whites don't give a damn if whites and blacks. There's more racism in the black community
Pause
than
it.
in the white.
Let me just he didn't fully develop this point about whites not giving a damn about whites and blacks marrying. He may not be. It was ironic that he said that after she had mentioned anti-miscegenation laws, which of course were laws in this country for the vast majority of this country that were not put in place by black people.
It wasn't black people during Reconstruction.
It was
you don't remember all those
the Nation of
sharecroppers?
Islam. It was the nation
organizing against that.
They organized. They were like, "Can't have it." It's 17.
Apparently, the history department at Prager University is woefully understaffed, and they did not give them a heads up on that.
They better get more tax-deductible donations.
There probably actually is a guy with like a mail-order diploma at PragerU who has like a theory of like the black creation of I wouldn't be surprised.
Whites don't give a damn if whites and blacks. There's more racism in the black community than in the white community.
100%.
I mean, it's one of the truths that because the left has, as I say every day, truth is not a left-wing value. It's a liberal value. It's a conservative value. It's not a left-wing value. So since the left dominates discourse, you can't say that truth.
Right.
But Kamala Harris, by the way, is married to a white man. You never see him. Did you notice that?
Don Lemon. Don Lemon.
Oh, Don Lemon's male.
Yeah.
Are they married?
I don't know if they're married, but,
All right, but his partner
it's a
or
white,
whatever.
yeah. And he talks about racism and the threat of white men all the time.
Isn't that amazing?
His partner's a white
I know.
male.
I would like to ask him if whites are, if all, does your white partner or husband or whatever it is he a racist?
I mean, that
guy's a bad Jew.
He is. Prager spends a lot of time in the black community, so he knows how embedded.
What's up,
racism.
brothers? Let's discuss racism.
The interesting thing about this exchange is it suggests to me that they don't understand that there is a relevance to power dynamics in these conversations. And I don't know what it is about that conversation that made it so obvious to me. I mean, obviously, this is nothing profound, but there was something about that conversation that just really, Dennis Prager is probably one of the top guys working in the field of making sure white people don't feel bad about their racism or their misogyny. Right? I mean, I think that's like his, that seems to be what the university's mission statement is.
Yeah, race panics are rational.
Right.
Hello.
It's fascinating. But she has moved on to her new grift, Candace Owens. Good for her. And, of course, Prager University. Let's play this clip. In the past, I was watching that Ben Shapiro clip of when he was on BBC, and aside from the sort of incredible beauty of him refusing to justify his positions and claiming that someone, maybe arguably to the right of him, at least in terms of like sort of like principled conservatism. Old school classic conservatism, claiming that guy was a radical lefty. It was interesting, now, of course, I have never been one who has bemoaned the lack of civility in our political discourse. I think that's actually a silly thing to cry about. I think that's something you do when you don't like the fact that people are actually making you account for your own positions, and that is a safe refuge. That's basically what for conservatives, aggrievement is the fundamental bedrock of their project. And so you get things like the intellectual dark web. We can only exist in the dark web, despite the fact that we are in the exact same web as everybody else.
But don't scrutinize us, web.
Right. It really is. Be. Yes. It's the intellectual don't scrutinize us web is what they really want to be in. But Shapiro was being accused of hypocrisy, I think, because he wrote a book bemoaning the crass nature and the polarization of our politics because of the bad faith of different actors in there. And then the guy, said, well, your YouTube videos are all Ben Shapiro destroys this and destroys that. And Shapiro's response was, of course, the well-reasoned response of, oh, I don't title them. And which, I understand that. I don't title our videos. I only know what maybe a small percentage of them are titled. But the real response really should be, and the honest response is, this is the medium. The nature of the YouTube medium is that you need to have sensationalistic titles to work the algorithm to get the videos seen. Now, the content themselves, that's a different story. And I don't think that excuse works in terms of the content. The titling, I think, is much more benign, ultimately, than the content. And certainly, I think our titles are similar. Now, I've never written a book saying that we need to have decorum and pleasantry in political discourse. I don't think that is a value we should pursue. Frankly, I don't care. I don't think that we're not this is not beanbag. But the reason why, and frankly, for a long time, I was very resistant to do things like optimize or to allow, hire people to optimize our videos in terms of the titling, because I thought it was sort of base. But the fact is that not only is that a requirement of the medium, but the medium is increasingly becoming the way in which young people get their politics. And so if we want to influence future generations, we need to speak to them, because we are facing, and I don't want to see Bill Nye, I want to see the this is number 13. There's a story in BuzzFeed about a 13-year-old girl who is I think you could describe her as alt-right. She is a red-pilling right-winger. She works with a collaborator. We don't know who that collaborator is. It's quite clear they are writing her scripts with her. And her YouTube name is Soph. It's really not so much about her per se. She has she IDs sometimes as a joke, as like an FBI agent, I guess, in certain times. I mean, you can check out her website. But there's two stories. This one, and I'm reading a story about in the Washingtonian about a 13-year-old who joined the alt-right, got onto 4chan, was feeling isolated from his friends, had been punished at a private school. I think this happens quite a bit at private schools, because the private schools are self-conscious about their lack of diversity, either racially or in terms of economics. That has been my observation in terms of like a lot of private schools in New York City. I mean, I don't have a kid who goes there, but I know people who go there and I read about them. And I think at times they become hypersensitive to any possible offenses. And kids get in trouble for things that at a public school where there's some measure of socioeconomic diversity, they just it's just a problem that you have with kids. And they just deal with it in that way. This 13-year-old who I guess it's a mom wrote about, he joined the alt-right, got isolated, had a fallout with people at school, got on 4chan, got on some Reddit subreddit threads, and became an alt-righter. I don't know what the story is with this 14-year-old girl, but this is where, this is the kind of information kids are getting. She's doing videos that are just, do we have the simple video, that first one where she's just videos like that any normal 12-year-old would do, all part of her channel. And she started out as just sort of I think, a benign YouTuber, maybe. I don't know if I would put my kid on for at 12, but
she was not Twitch, but streamed video games.
All right. Well, do we have that? Find out, because I want to show an example first of where she started. Yeah, here it is. Okay, this is her talking about Halloween.
Rather than that, and everybody at the table agreed with the main couple of people that are just picking at those around the room. I mean, sheeple. Seriously, you're just going along with that, not really thinking about, that's kind of fucked up. Oh yeah, and also some people use
Pause
the
it.
opportunity.
Now she's using, a fairly, explicit language for a 12-year-old, although I have a feeling my daughter uses the same language when I'm not around. But she's complaining about people's, costumes at school during Halloween. And, but she's grown into something much more. Now, here she is. She's picked up like some video from like a Dr. Phil episode about a black mom and her kid and whatnot. No, let's go back into the middle. We had picked out some times, I thought, but yeah, right there. Just go ahead, pick it up there. You could hear some of this. Go ahead.
Say you have to offer limits itself to this.
Ooh, that's just awful.
Yeah, of course I've been to their
That's just awful.
I'm not surprised she sought orientation elsewhere. Finger wagging isn't a productive means of communication.
My daughter does spend a lot of time on social media. I don't even look at her Facebook page. It's too painful.
Facebook
Pause
has
it. Now
pretty
this is the story of a mother whose kid is become like critical of black people, and they're both black, the mother and the daughter. But this is on Dr. Phil. It's one of those sort of sensationalized stories. But she is commenting on why the kid is right in her critique of black people. But it's good.
Speech. So if Treasure's posts didn't get her banned, they weren't as bad as her mother made them out to be. If a Facebook page is too painful for her, someone should show her pole and watch her go into a permanent coma.
As a parent, I kept expecting her to just outgrow it and thinking she would change. I pretty much was like an ostrich, put my head in the sand, and it's getting worse.
I bet this is what Jeffrey Dahmer's mother thought too, before he started melting people in vats of acid. Can't say I'm surprised. My expectations of this woman's parenting skills weren't very high. Judging by her out-to-lunch demeanor, how she remembers to wipe is beyond me.
I'm interested in doing this story because I think it's a teachable moment, and not for sensationalistic shock value because of some of the outrageous things that she says. So I don't think she's doing them to get attention. I think she's doing them because this is how she actually feels and believes.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes, I do. She says she's white.
Right, from a very early age.
This might be the only accurate assessment in the entire video. What I don't get is, if they know that she actually means what she says, why do they act so dismissively towards her? My guess is that they're too busy morally grandstanding about it to actually have a discussion with her about her mindset. That might just be a lack of comprehension on their part though. I'd wager that the majority of people who recognize racism to be wrong haven't ever formulated a proper explanation as to why they think so. I'm not saying everyone has to have a profound understanding of everything, but if these vultures are going out of their way to bother this girl, they should at least articulate their reason for doing so.
There you go. People don't have proper understanding about what racism is, according to her, or why it's wrong. I mean, it goes on. There's other stuff. She has done videos about Muslim rape gangs and social justice homos and the evils wrought by George Soros. She has said stuff. She's done so-called comedy videos. I've become a devout follower of the Prophet Muhammad. Suffice to say, I have having a ton of fun. Of course, I get raped by my 40-year-old husband every so often. I have to worship a black cube to indirectly please an ancient Canaanite god, but at least I get to go to San Francisco and stone the shit out of some gays, according to her, and the cops can't do anything about it because California is a crypto caliphate. These are the type of videos that she's doing. She does some of the classic Cernovich pedo videos in Hollywood. She does misanthropic videos, all reminiscent of 4chan posts. She apparently on her Discord channel is even more hateful. And the bottom line is, she's getting, she has 800,000 subscribers to her channel.
Report the channel.
She has a couple of 100,000 views per video at least. She has attempted to challenge YouTube to ban her, but apparently they're nervous about doing it. This is, we've seen versions of this in the past. Jonathan Crone we had on this program, I think 2012, I think it was, maybe or so, and he was a kid that Marin and I had talked about at Air America years before. But this is of a different order, and there's a whole new technological platform for people like this, and it's very disturbing. And frankly, this is why we do the YouTube stuff, is to get in there and to in some ways mitigate the messages these kids are getting. And I don't know that we alone can compete, and the dozen or so people in this space, I don't know that they can compete, but we try.
I mean, YouTube demonetized Sargon of Akkad's channel over the weekend. They should definitely, at least demonetize, if not just disable this channel.
We'll see. It is up to YouTube and advertisers if they want to be associated with this stuff. That's all. Look, there are advertisers who come to us that I say I don't want because I don't want to be associated with them. There are advertisers who look at my program and say, I don't want to advertise with him because I don't want to be associated with left-wing proposals or politics or whatever it is. It's perfectly legitimate in my mind. I don't know. I think, these companies can be pressured. I think that's a very good case for breaking them up into smaller entities so that there can be, Gab. You can go on Gab instead of Twitter and let your right-wing freak flag fly, as it were. But in areas that are, we have laws in this country that say that, if you're selling pornography on the street, at a magazines, you can't put them, can't display them in such a way that people on the street can easily see it. And I think that's legit. Who's your comrade on I Am? I've been keeping a list of books of your interviews, and I wanted to buy and read yesterday. I went to both a secondhand bookstore and Barnes & Noble, and they didn't have a single one in stock, but could order it for $38 each. They did have every Ayn Rand, Glenn Beck, and Trump memoir from as early as the 80s in the stock. Can you please ask your interviewers if there's a direct way we can buy their book outside of major retailers? We should put a link to the publishers. Maybe it's the best way to do it going forward. Let's go to the phones. We don't have too much time for more calls, but we'll go 646. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Train Boy from New York. How are you?
Train Boy, what's on your mind?
Well, I had a couple things, but I don't want to keep you too late. So I'm starting to get worried that the Democrats are deliberately throwing the Senate so that they don't have to do anything and can keep on fundraising off of the horror of the GOP government for the next however many years.
I don't think they have that level of coordination and planning, frankly. That would almost be encouraging if I thought they had that type of foresight. But no, I don't think that's the case. I do think that Chuck Schumer is a disaster. And I think that there is, you need someone who's going around to convince. He's the one who's presumably talking to candidates, right? And potential candidates and saying, here's what a Democratic Senate could look like. Like, I can tell you, like, at Air America, I remember at one point during our bankruptcy saying to the chief operating officer or whoever it was at the time was like, I think I have someone who has some money. And the guy said to me, well, if he's looking to make money, this is not the bet for him. And I was like, what? What aren't you supposed to be going out there getting, raising funds? And he was just, they were just like, they were morons. And I don't know if, it's possible he thought he had a better source of funding that would keep him in that position. And he didn't want someone on the outside, and which, maybe is sort of the scenario you're talking about, some measure of it. But I don't understand why Chuck Schumer wouldn't want certain candidates in the race, although it's conceivable to me that, like, maybe a Beto O'Rourke scares him a little bit coming from Texas. Maybe he'd rather, I don't know. Maybe he would rather have a Heidi Heitkamp type of person somewhere. And so
I don't think there's any question about that.
and so he might have in his mind, like, I'm going to influence other people instead of like concentrating on a Beto. I don't know. I really don't know.
But and at what point does do you have to say, like, incompetence becomes malice?
Well, it doesn't matter, though,
because
does it?
This is just.
I mean, the agenda really doesn't change. I don't, you're talking about the classic question, evil or stupid. And I think it's usually the answer is a little bit of both. And, but regardless, the agenda has to be the same. Like, I would love to see Chuck Schumer out of that position in the Senate.
Hashtag get the Chuck out.
Yeah. And I think, I think to the extent that, certainly the Senate, the Democratic caucus has moved to left, but there's also some major structural problems too that we have, where there's a couple of states that are just very difficult to get now for Democrats, and the way the Senate is structured is it's a problem for Democrats.
So, and my second point is we were talking about Viktor Orban earlier.
Yep.
And one thing that a lot of people don't know about him is, and I wish I could remember where I read this, but one of his first acts as prime minister was nationalizing Hungary's electrical grid. So now, whenever you get your electricity bill, it has two numbers on it. It has the number you're paying and the number you would have been paying, and the grid not been nationalized. So Orban gets to put a little picture of his face there and advertise. So
smart.
It's smart and incredibly evil.
Not that policy. I mean, it's unfortunate that he's the one doing it, but that's the right path.
George Bush.
I like one half of national Bolshevism.
Right.
People forgot that George Bush had a stimulus plan I think it was in 2004, maybe right before the election. And he literally, there's a couple of ways you can do that, right? You can just cut people's taxes. You can do a brief moratorium on people's taxes. They chose not to do that. They chose instead to send everybody a check for $243 so that everyone would know it came from George Bush. And that's what they did.
Terrified of doing that.
Yep, it was a mistake. Appreciate the call, Train Boy.
Choo choo.
Right. I think he was pointing out that the Obama during the stimulus got convinced by the pointy heads around him that he loved listening to that they shouldn't point out the tax cut in people's payroll taxes. So what happened was when they kicked back in, Republicans were like, he increased your taxes because he wasn't taking credit for a cut that existed.
Right.
Very well played.
Calling from an 860 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi there. It's Mike calling from San Rafael.
Mike, what's on your mind?
I was wondering about a recent Washington Post op-ed, basically talking about how the Maduro regime is surviving despite U.S. sanctions because of drug money. And I was wondering about the efficacy of those claims.
The validity of those claims, or
do they have
efficacy?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Do they have traction?
Are you asking?
Yes.
Are you asking if those?
Do they have traction?
Do they have traction?
Is that legitimate? Is that the reason why the regime is able to persist?
It's definitely not the only reason.
I don't know. I imagine it's conceivable. I think there's a decent amount of corruption. I don't know how much of that is drug money.
But it's definitely not literally the only reason. I mean, you can't get the amount of resistance that they have on the streets because of a small amount of drug cartel money and networks. Like, there's no doubt that from what I've seen that, yeah, there's elements of the government that are involved in cartel trafficking. I don't think, and by the way, I'm sure that would not change with a regime change, but the people being out on the street resisting an intervention, no, definitely not.
Appreciate the call. Calling from a 410 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Rube Davin from Maryland.
Rube Davin from Maryland. What's on your mind?
Long-time listener, first-time caller. I joined last week because I found out that Dave Rubin was going to be at the University of Delaware. So I made a short trip there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the clip yet, because there is a clip of somebody asking about you guys, and he briefly goes over Packman, but I specifically asked him about Packman, and that's where he said that Packman has also lied to him a bunch of times. Have you seen that clip? And
Are you Evan?
I'll just take my answer off the air, I guess.
Are you Evan?
Go ahead. No.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't see that clip. Is that a new clip? Is that a different clip?
No. So if you search for leftist asks Dave Rubin questions at University of Delaware, you'll find it. It's 6 minutes. I started off with some other questions because somebody else had asked about you, and they butchered your name and the name of the show. So I started with something else.
Oh, well, then you should have asked about us because...
Well, I did. Like I said, it's 6 minutes. So
okay.
I started off with something else, and then the second question was about you guys and
Dave,
other YouTube.
Dave is, he is a dishonest actor. And, I say this not to avoid talking to him. I will talk to anyone, and I will tell him to his face if he wants. He's a dishonest actor. If it makes him feel more comfortable for me not to say that to his face, I'm willing to not say to his face, you're a dishonest actor. I'm willing to just exclusively talk about issues because I'm curious. His positions do not seem coherent to me. And, or he can just have me on his show and ask me the same type of hard hitting questions he asks his other guests.
That should be what that show's for.
And I am happy to have that platform to espouse a different set of ideas than he will typically have on there. So I'm happy to do it. And I'm happy to have him make the terms public. And I will, there are no terms in which I will not sit down with him in any venue, at any time, at any place. If I have to bring my kids because I don't have a babysitter, I will do that.
Can I still talk? Am I still there?
Yeah.
All right. What he told me and everyone else is that if the guests he has on are not left enough, then the problem is with the people asking the question. So Eric Weinstein is as left as he's gonna get, I guess.
I see. Well, that is his play. And, my project here is, because I think it's very unlikely that he'll have me on. I would love it if he did. And, but I have a dual agenda. One is to make it clear that I would love to sit down with him under any conditions that he wants to propose, under any terms, again, any place. But the other one is that if he refuses to do that, I just simply want to make it clear to the world that his marketing is inconsistent with his actions. And so that is my agenda. And you have helped further that in some way, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Just take a look at the clip when you get a chance.
Definitely will. Thank you. Let's go. We'll take one more call. Calling from a 206 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
Yes, it is you.
All right. Hi, my name's Eddie. I'm in California.
Eddie from California. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to kind of speak to what you were saying earlier about your video titles and the way that you use them to sort of get them into the YouTube algorithm to get them working in there. Because that's actually how I found you guys. I'd been kind of watching some left-wing stuff, and your guys' videos just started auto-playing, and I got into the Majority Report, Michael Brooks Show, Antifada stuff, and I think that's that now, especially, like, there's a place for this kind of content on YouTube. Like, even though there are these like really messed up channels that have like so many subscribers, like I think like now, like even Carl Swindon, like his account got demonetized. I think there's a time for people who are smaller or pretty much anybody to start making content along the lines that promote this show's values, I guess. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit
more room for ideas.
No, I mean, I mean, I think you're right, and I don't know that there isn't. There hasn't always been room for it. It's just that I think that our material in particular was never really built with YouTube in mind first. This show started as a AM talk radio show. It then became a podcast. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, maybe halfway through its inception, maybe a little bit less, that we even started doing live video streaming. We would clip some stuff, but it was all second afterthought, and it's still more of a radio show in many respects than most YouTube shows. Most YouTube shows, that's why, some people will say like, well, you didn't make a video on this. And I said, well, we talk about it, but we just didn't clip it. And because most YouTube shows are shot segment by segment. So the segments you see on YouTube are created just as a segment. People plan it out, they sit down with it, they do it, and then to the extent that there's a full show, they sew that together. We don't do it that way. We do 2.5 hours, sometimes more, sometimes rarely less, and then we just clip it after the fact. And we don't really know exactly where we're going to go, what the order of the show is going to be. It just basically free flows. And, so optimizing the videos and getting people to understand that we're slightly different product than most of the other type of shows has been a little bit of an uphill climb, but I think we've hit some type of critical mass where people sort of get it. So appreciate the call, Eddie. Thank you. Thanks for watching, listening, doing whatever you're doing. All right, we'll take one more phone call. We got a lot of people who have been hanging on for a long time. Let's just pick a number 530. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
This is Oz from Mount Shasta.
Oz from Mount Shasta. Welcome to the program.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I keep hearing about democratic socialism and social democrats. I'd like to hear a lot more about libertarian socialism, which is what I'm more into. And I'd like to tell you my take on how the military and police would operate in that kind of system. And let's look at the Second Amendment, what it actually is supposed to mean when you talk about well-regulated militia. I mean, that's supposed to be more like a Swiss-style militia, a people's militia, not an offensive military of empire. And the police and military would function in the same way that jury duty does, basically. I'm a veteran, and I think that our military, I'm a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, and I think that it's just completely wasteful, a lot of the stuff, that our military does, and we're the military is the, the largest one of the largest polluters on the planet.
Yep.
And it's completely inefficient, the things that we do. That's just one thing. Another thing, about that crazy abortion law, with the same argument that they're making. I mean, wouldn't teratoma tumors, I guess, should be left alone then because they have, eyeballs and teeth and hair growing out of them.
Right. Well, let me ask you this.
Right?
Let me ask you this. I mean, what is it that? Why do you identify as a libertarian?
I'm not an anarcho-capitalist. That's not the libertarian that I'm talking about. I'm talking about left-wing libertarianism.
Yeah, I think I'm curious as to what that word means to you in that context.
Basically, individual autonomy, self-reliance, self-sustainability.
And I mean, do you perceive
let me do what I want as long as? Go ahead.
Do you perceive that as you were about to say, "Let me do as long as what I want to do, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else"? How does that jibe with with the socialism, which necessarily basically subscribes to the idea that we will have a democratic process to determine, different things that society will do collectively? That
Well, it's basically more anti-authoritarian because when you have too much bureaucracy, I'm not anti-bureaucracy, but when you have too much of centralized power, it becomes authoritarian.
Would you consider George Orwell a libertarian socialist?
He's kind of, he's bounced around across the map on a lot of things, but I'd have to look more into. He used to work for the BBC, correct?
Right.
So.
I guess
I
what
don't really know
lineage do you
exactly.
see yourself in? What kind of lineage do you see yourself in? Like, where is this coming from?
Well, I come from an agrarian background, and you're kind of stumping me, I guess. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous too, calling in for the first time.
No worries. I mean, I don't mean to.
Blanks, Let me tell you this. I support voluntary collectivization, especially in farming, pertaining to smaller and medium-sized farms. But collectivization has to be voluntary, because if you have someone forcing you to collectivize your farm, then that's authoritarian.
Yeah, I think, you can go back and listen to some of the debates I've had with like Adam Kokesh or even Walter Block.
Yeah, but he's a right winger. I'm not right wing.
No,
man.
I understand, but there are
specific
specific arguments that I've made in regards to the idea of a monopoly of force. And I simply believe,
like, I understand the argument against property rights, and I agree with it.
Well,
I agree with you. I saw the debate with you and Kokesh about the shirt thing.
Yeah, no, the property rights are there too, but I do believe there needs to be a monopoly of force. I do believe that there needs to be.
I guess you'd say,
you got to let me finish.
Maybe I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I do believe that there needs to be a monopoly of force, and there needs to be an authority, I think there needs to be a healthy dose of democracy in terms of how we establish that, and there needs to be checks and balances, and but that we need to subscribe to that, and just as I don't know what your sense is about taxation, but it seems to me the dynamic is basically set. And if we're going to have a society that at the very least pursues socialistic principles of, democratizing the wealth of society and the benefits of society and the responsibilities of society, you need to have, some people are going to need to be forced to do that to some extent. Not everybody's going to want to pay higher taxes.
Yeah, I support nationalization of natural resources, like minerals and timber. I'm a forester and an arborist. I'm basically a lumberjack. And Sierra Pacific is owned by R.G. Emerson. He's like the third largest landowner in the U.S. And I live near, Mount Shasta, Redding, California is a shithole. And that guy, the only jobs here are retail and service jobs or working for him. And he pays crap. And he has all these mansions, and we have this terrible homeless problem here. And I think timber should be nationalized, water should be nationalized. T. Boone Pickens wants to take over water,
Right. Well, I guess my sense is this:
if water was nationalized.
let me because I gotta get going here. But my sense is this: is that there is no escaping the fact that at least it seems to me, at least in broad in large swaths of human history. I mean, I guess we've had more collectivist and more lateral societies as opposed to hierarchical ones. But I think, particularly in the context of our country, I don't, with the amount of people that we have, I think it's either going to be a government or it's going to be corporations and just wealth that is going to have some type of monopoly of force. And I would prefer it be government because we have a mechanism in which to make that more democratic. And but we can talk more in the future. But right now, I cannot.
If we do that, it's got to be direct democracy. Direct democracy.
Yeah,
democracy.
I understand.
That's the only way it's going to work.
I appreciate that, but the problem is we have 300 million people, and that's direct democracy is just not going to happen. I think we need to. I mean, personally, that's why I actually, don't consider myself a full-on socialist insofar as that I, believe that we should have a mixed economy, because I think having a certain amount of tension is important to provide checks and balances. I don't think it's possible to get rid of the impetus that created capitalism and created feudalism and that created, empire and whatnot. I don't think we can get rid of it totally. I think we just need to rebalance society in such a way that, that impetus does not win out. All right, that's it for our calls today. Apologies if you left hanging. Apologies to Bill Nye. We'll have to get to him tomorrow. I'm going to take a bunch of IMs and then get going. Rando, glad you didn't get too aggressive with the libertarian teasing with this caller. Actually, was an interesting call. Yeah, no, I mean, I think sometimes I don't want to get too caught up in semantics. I'm not quite sure I understand the idea, and I think it's, I think some of the stuff gets a little bit too theoretical in my mind. But Kentucky Fried Chicken. Hey, Sam, I saw a story in Politico yesterday about how the Congressional Black Caucus is floating the idea of a Biden-Harris as a dream ticket. Not sure that's actually practical, though. Wouldn't they need two separate but equal campaign buses and planes?
Because Biden opposed school integration.
Yes.
Not bad. It was pretty good.
Yep. I love Sarah Palin. Hey, Sam, my birthday was yesterday. Can I get a Funk Flex bomb? I'm not sure what that means, but I'll give you one of these. You're always blaming the electorate for not knowing what's going on, and I agree with you. But a large percentage of the population typically doesn't know the major stories going on at any given time. For instance, people still don't know women came out after Pussygate to accuse Trump. And I'm sure people don't know that the New York Times story about Trump inheriting $413 million. So what better forum to run a 2020 campaign ad against Trump than during an impeachment hearing? No, I agree. Depressive aggressive. Someone super chatted David Pakman and asked if he agreed with MR's politics or does he like the show. And he said he loves your deep dive interviews, but finds the guy who does voices occasionally very offensive.
Whoa, Pakman.
He's coming after us.
Wow. First stealing the set.
I would just not necessarily.
Hey.
Depressive aggressive could be.
I don't take that at face value, and I have nothing but respect.
Rave Dubin. Hey, Sam, I think the way you get onto debate with Dave, all you have to do is get sponsored by Liberty University. Gregory from Oklahoma. Hey, y'all, I have an announcement to make. I've started my own podcast. It's on SoundCloud. It's called The Green Cord Rebellion Show. I have only one recorded podcast so far. I plan on doing at least 4 or 5 a week. Damn. I'll be talking about politics here in Oklahoma, national and international politics. I'm even going to talk about heavy metal music. I've started a Patreon account. I could really use patrons since I'm currently unemployed, and I'm doing this podcast, and I want to hopefully expand it to YouTube. Now when I am the show, I will not be Gregory from Oklahoma. I will be Gregory from Green Corn Rebellion. Congratulations. There you go. Find it on SoundCloud, folks.
Also, I mean, just me personally, my work ethic, I wouldn't start 4 times a week.
I would not start 4 times a week. I would
Whoa,
do
4 times a
two,
week. No, sir.
do 2 good shows a week if you're desperate to do it.
Yeah.
And I would do it on fans.fm.
The public shows on Fans. Do some save some patrons only content, I guess.
Okay, let's see. All right, I'll take 5 more. Pajama Boy. Hey, Sam, I'm mostly going for Warren in this primary with Bernie in a close second. She decided not to do a Fox Town Hall after the success of Bernie's Fox Town Hall. Do you think this is a mistake? I don't think it would be bad for her to do it. A Square. Sam, the Demos running for Senate in Georgia presented the arguments against Georgia bill so succinctly and with the right messaging. Women became the vessels of the state at conception. I think it's 10 30 into the show. You should check it out. Jamie, so sorry for your generation, but nothing left but fight. Oh, on Joy Reid's show on Saturday, 10 minutes in. Disco Stew. While the GOP is awful, it is objectively true to say Trump is uniquely more dangerous than any modern president. His racist and violent language has real-world material consequences for people of color and women. Progressive minimize this to their own peril when they dismiss Biden's appeal to tone as having no substance or when he tried to pivot to economics and class. It's a reoccurring theme, and it breeds distrust of progressives. Tone is policy when racist violence is exploding due to Trump's rhetoric. I guess I just don't think he's the greatest messenger when it comes to that either, frankly. But your mileage may vary. I guess we'll see as we. I understand that the value of it. I don't know that there's data to support the notion that people think that Biden is the best person to deal with that issue as much as they just think that he appeals maybe to Trump supporters more and could win and will necessarily be better than Trump. And I think he will be better than Trump, but that's not a very high bar. Winnipeg Craig, solidarity with Michael and all workers who call in sick when they just don't feel like coming in. And speaking of sticking it to the man, the transit union in Winnipeg is doing a labor action today. They're not enforcing the fee collection on Winnipeg buses because they've been working without a new contract since January. Tomorrow, we're doing a show on the Winnipeg Wildcat strike.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I'm not going to be here, so you better be
Canadian-related content, so I'll probably...
Well, you're going to
my
have to
own
come
strike.
in.
Yeah.
Leftist,
We'll see it. No,
European.
that's great.
Will you be covering and upcoming European
Wildcat
Parliament
strike,
elections?
hey.
Very interesting things happen in new parties and different pan-national coalitions. We may be a little bit.
Beyond the Sargon stuff?
Attorney Andrew, question for the crew. If you could only do one of the following, what would you choose and why? Job guarantee paid at the minimum wage, unemployment benefit set at the minimum wage for 40-hour work week, or presumptive unionization. Anytime a new company is founded, its eligible employees get a union. To get rid of the union, employees would have to go through a decertification process to put aside the... I don't know why those 3 are the only...
I would go with unionization, though. I do think unionization.
But it's with new companies.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. These are all little micro
It's like there's
things.
something in each of those that makes them garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. Come back with better options. You
June
want
Horn.
hypotheticals? Do better hypotheticals.
MR Crew had a friend ask me about how to fix the issue of criminal sentencing outside of auditing judges' sentencing and removing them from office without pension. I was looking for a good source on reform in this area to make sentencing more equitable. Legislation. B-win. Ray Gun is correct. I've seen the salmon-colored panels. Found it highly suspicious.
It is validated, so Reagan was right.
What?
That's true.
How can he do that?
I don't know what he's doing. It doesn't even look that good either.
No.
Independent.
He needs different light gels.
And
Smooth
apparently
court.
he doesn't like the funny impressions.
One example, the growing open extremism on abortion in response. Lila Rose, Dave Rubin Persuader, wants abortion to be illegal even without an exception for the life of the mother. That to me is the only it makes sense. If you are going to be, I don't understand the people who say an exception for rape, when it comes to abortion. That to me just seems like they just know that they can't sell this to the public, but it doesn't make sense. And if they're going to be maximalist when it comes to a woman has no right over sovereignty of her own body. I don't even know why they would say rape is illegal.
I mean, that's the ludicrous thing about Dave's dance around, is he still pro-choice, or is
well,
he now
he's
gonna be
he's saying that he's like
waffling
getting
around?
convinced because of all this infanticide that's going around.
Yeah.
All right, the final IM of the day. Okay, there it is. Phil, would it make sense to propose legislation which provides a threshold of damages to the people in the U.S. which would allow the government to automatically nationalize the company? I.e., if the damages are larger than the public value of the company, it stands to reason that it's the government who's going to be responsible for the cleanup and hence should just own the company. I guess, I mean, if you're talking from a civil procedure, but that seems small bore to me. All right, folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.